The abandoned asylum. The Ravenswood Asylum for the criminally insane squatted amidst the twisted forest like a malevolent creature from a waking nightmare. Its looming, irregular spires stabbed towards the slate-gray sky, weathered bricks weeping tears of decay. The cracked windows stared vacantly outwards, as lifeless and soulless as a haunt's unblinking gaze. Perched atop one of the highest turrets, a rusted weather vase creaked in the autumn wind, the withered gargoyle head that adorned it seeming to clear down at the overgrown grounds that surrounded the asylum. Tangles of underbrush and briars had long since reclaimed the forgotten paths, devouring any signs of the ordered world once kept here. For decades, the asylum had remained sealed off, its cast-iron gates locked and warning signs hastily nailed to the fencing by authorities. But such barriers meant little unless to the bored, thrill-seeking teens it beckoned like a siren song. On the kind of crisp October night when ghosts were said to roam, 6 reckless youths felt the pull of the asylum's dark mysteries. Ignoring the whispered tales of madness, violence, and occult evil surrounding its crumbling walls, they began their fateful trek towards its secrets. "You guys are chickening out already?" Mike scoffed at his friends as they approached the asylum's perimeter fencing and overheard the groans of dismay. "Thought you badasses wanted an adventure." The rusty chain links were no match for Mike's bolt-cutters, parting like brittle bones as he snipped through with ease. Jess smirked and sauntered through first, the pack's self-styled alpha female. "Last one in is a rotten asylum patient," she taunted, laughing as she led them across the weed-hopped grounds towards the ornate entrance portico. "This is so stupid," Carl muttered under his breath, trudging reluctantly after the others. Try as he might, he couldn't suppress the growing pit of dread gnawing at his stomach. The distressed wooden door and ornately carved frame hadn't admitted visitors for decades untold. Jess gave it an experimental shove, grimacing as the wood shuddered against its rusted hinges. Behind her, Mike rolled his eyes. "Allow me, princess." Bracing his shoulder against the ancient portal, he drove his weight into it with steadily increasing force until, with a splintering crack, it exploded inward in a billowing cloud of dust and plaster. "Oh yeah, baby," Mike crowed, stepping through the ruined doorway like a conqueror claiming his prize. "Who's the man?" The asylum's foyer was a sprawling space that could have accommodated a mansion's grand ballroom. Yet there was nothing grand about its ravaged, defiled interior. Shattered chandeliers caked in decades of grime dangled precariously from coffered ceilings like debased crowns. Every surface was coated in a pastiche of graffiti, lurking figures and blasphemous sigils overlapping endlessly in a kaleidoscope of madness. "Whoa," Vicky murmured, her voice echoing in the shadows. "This is crazy." The group stood in slack-jawed awe, their movements leaving trails in the inches of dust that blanketed the floor tiles. Slivers of moonlight piercing the boarded windows were their only illumination aside from the beams of their flashlights. "I can't believe we're actually inside the Ravenswood Asylum," Samantha whispered. "After all the stories." "Stories?" Mike sneered derisively. "You mean the baby ghost tales scared little kids tell?" "I dunno, man." Carl began uneasily. "They said some pretty messed up stuff went down in this place. My cousin knew a guy whose friend got admitted here back in the 70s. Jess interjected. "He said they used to do experimental lobotomies and psychosurgery, drilling holes in people's brains and shit." The beam of her flashlight danced across the foyer's walls, revealing pits and gashes marring the warped plaster at odd intervals. "Looks like they saved some money on modern art." "Huh?" Mike joked callously as the beam lingered over a spiderweb of crisscrossing scores that could only have been. Laughter at Mike's crude remark drained into an uneasy silence as the realization collectively dawned upon them those weren't mere soughs or nicks, they were the frantic scribblings and gouge marks of tormented souls clawing at the walls in unbridled madness. The dank corridor Beck had led them to stretched off into impenetrable gloom. Only one path presented itself at the four-way junction, a decrepit metal door bowed inward from relentless corrosion, yet still sturdy enough to bar passage. "I got this," Mike grunted, wedging his bolt-cutters into the gap and straining with the leverage of both arms until the rusty latch finally sheared apart with a screech of protest. The door groaned open, revealing a lightless void beyond. "The maintenance tunnels used to run beneath the whole asylum," Jess informed the others knowledgeably. "Staff could get everywhere through 'em, even the sub-basement levels." Sweeping her flashlight beam into the blackness, she revealed a claustrophobic passage branching off in myriad twisting paths, a nightmarish descent into the subterranean bowels of the asylum itself. Mike did not hesitate before plunging ahead, the reverberation of his footfalls swallowed by the impervious dark. After a moment's hesitation, one by one the others trailed after. Samantha, the last to enter, pulled the groaning door closed behind them, prompting a pause as every light was extinguished. Total blackness embraced them like a velvet shroud, muffling their voices into distorted echoes as they fumbled to spark their beams again. As illumination sputtered back, a low rumbling became audible like some titan's bestial breathing resonating from the endless network of tunnels. "You hear that?" Vicky hissed, her voice edged with panic. "Relax." Mike shot back gruffly. "It's just the heating and water pipes or some shit." Deep underground, ancient infrastructure groaned and stirred underfoot, as if awakening from centuries of disuse. The tunnel angled down at a steep grade, puddled trenches carving its center like a stagnant moat. Its crumbling brickwork was a seamless furrow of claw marks, the desperate etchings of minds demented by fear and torment. Human detritus from decades past, patient wristbands and tarnished pennies, rusted tins and malted candle stubs, dank-crusted rags and foul unguents mingled with newer cast-offs hinting at the tunnels used by vagrants and occult drifters. Mike halted at an intersection, spinning about with his light at sounds that could have been the skittering of rats. Or something larger, hulking, feral. Sweeping the beam low, he recoiled at the sight of something vaguely humanoid hunched in a lightless puddled recess, quickly realizing it was but an inert pile of indescribable flotsam and refuse. Red scrawled across the tunnel mouth in what could only be ancient blood warned, "Go back. His face is the last thing you'll see." "Just great," Mike scoffed, undeterred. "A bunch of stupid bums trying to scare kids. Come on, pussies, this way." They could feel it with every yard traversed, the heaviness of yawns of madness, the smothering beyond even the subterranean depths. The cloying darkness seemed to thicken around them, dense as brackish pond scum. A miasma of unfathomable evil seeped from the very bricks themselves, the harnal reek of death and violence soaked into their very foundations by years of depravity. "What the fuck is that smell?" Mike gagged, swiping his arm across his face. At last the bravado drained from his voice as a deep, primal dread set in, the jarring certainty that they should not be here. Delving deeper into the profane mysteries of this godforsaken place. "Dead shit." Carl writhed through the upraised arm shielding his nose and mouth. "Rotting corpses or something." "Told you this was a bad idea." The others instinctively cringed together, hearts pounding in unmitigated terror as Samantha's flashlight beam carried over heaps of organic matter in various stages of decay. At the periphery of the light, gnarled appendages and distorted humanoid shapes seemed to materialize from the blackness, then were gone in a gut-roiling instant. "Oh my God," Vicky sobbed, her eyes welling with nauseated tears. "Those were bodies. Fucking dead bodies all over the place. What kind of sick fucks were these people? They didn't just torture the patients' minds," Jess murmured hoarsely. "They were doing experiments on them. Depraved, evil, twisted fucking experiments that killed scores of people. Do you now see why this place is so haunted?" An anguished howl split the dense subterranean air, echoing from unseen chambers in a reverberating chorus. It was the scream of a being not quite human, yet bearing the unmistakable strains of mortal suffering, a soul forever damned. The chilling sound lashed their nerves like whips spring a blind panic. As one, the friends bolted down myriad tunnels and corridors in a mad, scattering rout, torn between clashing fight-or-flight instincts. Self-preservation splintered their unity until they found themselves utterly lost and alone amidst the lightless labyrinth's abyssal depths. Only too late would they understand there could be no flight, no escape from what lurked waiting in darkness. Something was terribly, irreparably wrong. The signs had been there all along, a trail of ominous breadcrumbs heralding the horrors awaiting within the Casuklone's secrets precincts. Yet all warnings, the slashed graffiti reads, the putrescent organic mounds, the half-glimpsed harnal shapes were ignored in a heady haze of youthful arrogance and obsession with probing its depths. Now their reckoning had come, delivered not by any earthly malign force, but by entities far older and more sinister. Mike would be the first to encounter them. His panicked flight through a dampened side corridor ended abruptly when his foot slipped in a spreading pool of foulness. Landing hard, he whirled around with his fading flashlight beam and recoiled in shocked revulsion. Two gnarled, leathery bodies squatted beside a crude altar slab, their long talons hooked into what remained of a glistening human corpse. Languid entrails spilled across the slick flagstones. the hollow torso serving as a vessel for some blasphemous rite. Chanting in an incomprehensible tongue, the hunched figures cleared with visages too ancient and degenerate to classify as human, slitted lamprey eyes atop hairless, bone-brindled skulls with nostril slits and razor ilia caressing the sodden air. What in God's name are you things? Mike managed to gasp, while rising in his gorge with sick constriction. One of the foul creatures lifted its dripping maw, issuing a gurgling keen that degenerated into anguished howls of rage and rapture. The reverberated cries spurred the others to stumble upon the grisly tableau in the chamber's open arched doorway, a gibbering chorus of primal terror strangling all breath in their lungs. Swaying and intoning their arcane obscenities, the Casatlum's depraved wardens beckoned to their latest sacrificial offerings. The rituals of ages past had sown their profane seeds deep within these sunken phantoms, and now those seeds had germinated in pestilent flower at the doomed youth's arrival. As if spirits of primal evil had lain in wait all along for this dread culmination. Perhaps it was human nature to believe evil's origins or spawn from the world beyond. Concepts like demonic entities were a convenient mythology, a means for society to dismiss what true horrors lay within the recesses of humanity itself. The cultists' atrocities that claimed the young trespassers' lives were no grand spectacles of the supernatural. They were, however, rites far older than the hallowed science and grounds of Ravenswood Asylum, macabre vestiges bestowed through the heredity of Krishnara, lone eldest survivor of an accursed clan that had brought their depravities to the New World from the antediluvian mysteries of the Orient. The teen interlopers had sealed their fates the moment they breached the Casatlum's decrepit portals. For 2 centuries, the acolytes' forbidden arts had flourished undisturbed in the bowels of Ravenswood, propagating their blasphemous genetics through incestuous rites and the ritualized mutilations of taken innocents who strayed too near. Their very existence was a theophagy obscenity upon nature, a parasitic blight that corrupted future and past in equal measure. To witness their druid-like rites, the dismemberment of flesh catalysts, the demonic chants echoing down through centuries, the cultists' faces twisted in ecstatic rapture, was to bear witness to the true face of evil in this world. Before them, the screams of the dying youths joined an endless chorus of sacrificial wails hallowed throughout the cosmos' darkest voids. Then at last, silence. The rites were complete anew. As fresh blood seeped into the earth, the cultists collectively bowed their monstrous heads in humble offering. Deep within Ravenswood's haunted womb-like recesses, profane forces began to quicken and stir once more. Some structures, like unquiet graves, were so steeped in misery and pain that they attain a blasphemous sentience. Their foundations become imbued, clotted with the psychic echoes of horrors they've absorbed like loam-soaking blood. Such was the fate that befell Ravenswood Asylum long ago. Originally conceived as a panacea for the ills of society's outcasts, its halls inevitably corrupted by darkness. The weight of accumulated anguish, torture, and blasphemous rites tilled its soil until it became fertile ground for malign energies to germinate. And like any ethereal ecosystem, equilibrium of those defiled grounds depended upon balance. As the aging cultists tended their gnarled family tree with infusions of fresh sacrifice, the Casatlum's haunted terror absorbed new vitality. Fed by frenzies of violence, its profane legacy would propagate through another generation of foul rites unseen. Slaked by bloodlines of innocence, the hallowed soil reaffirmed its hungering grasp upon both spirit and desiccated flesh alike. Beyond the chained perimeters, civilization rushed ever onward at a feverish pace. Decades bled into centuries as the modern world was erected relentlessly atop such antediluvian horrors as Ravenswood's dark heart. Sleek metal and glass edifices obscured its gnarled silhouette, lulling the masses to complacency and casual dismissal of its unspeakable origins. Yet ever patient, the tainted grounds awaited the inevitable with solemn certitude, not unlike a fungal slumber beneath pristine woodlands. Spores resting ounce for some spark to rouse their spores onto apocalyptic bloom. Its haunted corridors dozed amidst the cycles of progress and urban renewal like an eldritch leviathan subterranean dreaming. Its permutations of the profane had seeded the tapestry of time and space, interwoven into humanity's collective consciousness. In shadowed places where the veil of daylight swept asunder, horror waited within urban legend and modern fancy. Rumored sightings of dark cult activities, ghouls stalking city tunnels far beneath gentrified boroughs, or the cries of sacrificial victims rent through plazas where office towers now loomed, ensuring the Casatlum's legacy echoed immortally onward. for its blood ground had yielded a blasphemous harvest whose encodings could never be truly uprooted, no matter what humanity erected over its tainted soil. As the world turned ever inward upon itself, all trajectories inevitably bent back towards the source of such harrowing genesis. Much as a black hole's singularity beckoned the very universe into its maw. When the cycle reset, only the grounds would remain the Cacyclum's husked, coursed huskline fallow and shrouding mooncast shadows as it had for untold epochs before. Patient and undying, disturbed only by the soft patter of decaying matter shed from its outer carapace. Deep beneath its tainted bones would pulse a sullen heartbeat, grimly awaiting the inevitable repopulation of its charnel haunts. Just as locusts arose every cycle to swarm the lands anew, debased sowers would eventually come to till its soil with fresh blood and dankened viscera from lives forsaken. Though the reckless teen trespasser's fate was but momentary blip in the Cacyclum's continuum, their collective detritus would linger in the underground precinct's psychic sediment. Their final screams harmonized richly with the massed howls suffusing those abyssal vaults, since time immemorial agonized arias of existence severed to spark horrors antediluvian and eternal. Upwards through the ivy-matted corridors and cracked spires, their dying exhalations issued like downdrafts of hell's own leprous zephyrs. Past the rust-decked fences and into the outer world these currents rippled, wisps of iniquity tainting every living spirit they caressed. In that cursed autumn when the asylum first drank deep from the youth's husked vessels, the surrounding woods grew sickly and feral. Long dormant seeds twisted into profane parodies, their branches gnarling into arthritic claws as encroaching mushrooms blossomed into grotesque mammalian shapes. Locals reported hearing demented laughter echoing through the forest glenways at night, followed by the fading shrieks of something being dragged back towards the foreboding asylum grounds by gnashing, unnatural things. Over time, the one thriving township sprouting at Ravenswood's outer perimeter withered to abandonment as well. All who failed to flee the precincts soon fell prey to the encroaching darkness that leached outwards like a fungal dementia. Left unminded, lawns and parks became overrun by strangling ropes of flytraption tendrils and trunks coating the skies in semi-sentient anopies. Layer by layer, the asylum propagated its malignant seepage across the entire borough. The outer world's veneer of civilization became enshrouded, enveloped at last by the same eternal nightmare that had haunted its precincts throughout history. When the encompassing wildlands had fully reclaimed their forgotten dominance, not a single witness remained. The taint spores dispersed through mushroom vents across the wine-blasted plains, and the accursed Cacyclum's fungal miasma spread its restless perimeters outward into forever like the very jaws of the abyss yawning eternal.